All right. What's up, Singapore? Thank you for having me. Thank you, Swee Lee, Isaac, and Sam, and the whole team. It's an honor to be back here. And yeah, we're going to talk bass. I'll play a few things. I've got a different axe this time since I was here last. The 3, which this one actually lives in Singapore, so I can play it every time I'm here. But yeah, Sam and I will get into it. Start a little something from the catalog.
Thank you guys for coming to a conversation with Joe Dart. Of course, thank you, Joe, for coming down tonight. So glad to have you here. We're really glad we got to put this together. Joe dropped us an email just like a couple weeks back. The team, like everyone got this. We're so happy that you want to come back.
Thank you guys for having me, truly.
Okay. I've got a few questions tonight, so we're just kind of going to go through it. It's going to be a casual thing, and maybe we'll get to see you play a bit too. Yeah, and if you guys have got any questions in the crowd as well, please just like reach out. We'll probably have a microphone going around. So as we're going through the questions, if you have your own questions, please just like, raise your hand. Yep. Isaac has the microphone there. Just to start, so I prepared a few questions and a few photos here. So, this is kind of my own top questions. This is kind of a personal one, and I thought it might be interesting for you guys as well. But Vulpeck seems to really have a love for vehicles. A lot of the songs, like Marjorie, My First Car, So I saw you had a couple of these pictures on your Instagram. So one was this bike, as well as the car from My First Car.
All the 240. Yes.
Yeah. So can I ask, what's the connection between yourself or Vulpeck and these vehicles, and how does that affect the music for you?
Great question. There was one more that I never owned, but I always wanted to own, which was a Saab 900, which appears in Vulpeck lore. In The Funky Duck, there's a lyric that he owns a truck, but he drives a Saab, which I don't really get. And then there's a test drive, one of our songs, which featured a video initially of a Saab 900. Jack Stratton and I have a similar aesthetic love of these older boxy cars. Jack saw me driving in the 240, and he thought it had sort of a professorial kind of thing. You wear like a thick sweater and you're driving like a Moody's, like a very safe Swedish car. And Stratton saw the video of me in front of the car, or the picture in front of the car, and he And that was from my buddy had posted that on Instagram, and he screenshotted it and used it as the album cover without ever asking me or telling me that he was going to. So that was how the 240 entered lore. It wasn't technically my first car, but it sort of was my first car that I bought. So that was my first car, and then at some point we used that car to drive around the band in Ann Arbor. I remember one time driving that car onto the quad in the middle of campus at University of Michigan, and I drove the car like all the way right to the center of the campus, and we got out and we played on the steps of the school. And Vulpeck, we're basically a music school band, you know, and I joined that band pretty much within basically within days of going to college. It wasn't Vulpeck yet. It was Jack Stratton's former band called Groove Spoon. But within days of coming to my university, I met Jack Stratton. And but yeah, cars have always been a big part of my life. I drove back and forth like 4.5 hours each way every weekend in college my first year. And I like to get on a bike too. Now that I'm in Southeast Asia, I'm sort of like longing to get on a bike. But yeah, there's some car lore throughout. Good catch.
Okay, that's really cool. I mean, something else just going off of that. Do you think like a lot of these personal experiences in your life, or these things that mean something to you, like how do you work that into music, or like like?
Yeah, good question. The guys in the band all have somewhat similar backgrounds, and so I think with Vulpeck in particular, we share almost, I don't know, like a musical heritage. We all grew up in the Midwest in America. So Jack's from Ohio, and I'm from Michigan, and Woody's from Chicago, and these are all like neighboring, deep northern Midwest places, and we all are pretty much descended from like music. Like weirdly, the guys in the band are all either sons or grandsons of musicians who mostly were like immigrants from Eastern Europe, and they all ended up in these little musical hubs. So Jack's dad is like a klezmer clarinet band leader. My grandfather was a violinist, and Theo's father was a jazz trumpeter. And so, you just sort of share this experience of growing up around music and around people who've made a life of playing music. And then, you also share the music you listened to as a kid. So I remember me and Jack Stratton, it turned out that we both had listened a lot to these compilation CDs, pure funk, pure disco, which had like, all the, Chic and Tower of Power and Earth, Wind and Fire and Average White Band and all of these classic like 70s and 60s funk. So I grew up listening to this stuff. Jack Stratton grew up listening to this stuff. And we sort of like found immediately that we had a similar musical language. Theo grew up, he would see a lot of the bands that I had loved. Soul Live. Theo was a big Fish guy. Theo had a little bit of a jam band kind of thing going on, and so did I in my early years. So you end up finding people who you share a musical language with, and I think Jack Stratton in particular and I linked immediately, partially because he's a bass player too. Like he's a really good bass player, and so I feel like once you only have to play with somebody for like 10 minutes to find out whether you sort of speak the same language. So for me, it just so happened that my Midwest and musical upbringing seemed to be just very, very similar to that of the other guys that I play with still.
That's really cool to hear. I know, as well, you grew up in Michigan, like you went to uni there, university. Like, could you just talk a little bit about that, like what the music scene was there for you, like what it was like for you? Like, were there any key figures there? Because like Michigan is actually rooted in, like, there's a lot of like really dope music and like history there, but I don't feel like it's talked about as much when it comes to music history.
True. I mean, what, growing up in Michigan, I at some point in my teens, I began to appreciate the Motown legacy, and I began to appreciate that, Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye, and all of these, great Motown, all this stuff that you would hear now, the stuff that I revere now, all the James Jamerson bass lines and all of that stuff is, a lot of it came from Michigan, a lot of it came from Detroit. And then the town that I went to college in was a big musical hub within the state because of, basically because there were so many young people there. So when I grew up, I wanted to go somewhere where I could be surrounded by great musicians. And I thought, okay, the whole point is just to join a band. For me, that was the whole point. And I think as a bass player, if you realize that you're a rhythm section, like I'm a rhythm section musician. In order to play in a rhythm section, you need a drummer and rhythm guitarist. So I went to University of Michigan because I saw these musicians coming out of that school. So there were bands coming out. There was a band called Tally Hall. There was a band called My Dear Disco. There was the band that Jack Stratton formed was playing around campus. That was called Group Spoon. And it came before Vulpeck. Well, when I came to U of M, there was already, Jack Stratton had already kind of made a name for himself. So he was playing not only with his funk band, which was like a 10-piece funk band, but he was also, Jack Stratton was producing albums for musical theater people. He worked with because there's a great musical theater school at U of M. So Jack Stratton actually has a musical theater background in a way. And if you listen to the most recent Vulpeck record, you can really hear that musical theater stuff start to come through. Part of that's Jacob Jeffries, who joined the band, who's also from a musical theater background. But so Jack Stratton had already made a name for himself. Theo Katzman, my bandmate, had already made a name for himself. I saw those guys playing because I would come visit my brother, who's here. He went to University of Michigan, kind of paved the way. I came down and I was hanging out in town. I was seeing these guys. I remember seeing Theo. I saw Theo on stage. I was 17 and I was 5 feet from Theo. And he just had this sort of larger than life kind of stage persona. Such a good guitarist, such a good singer, but also just such a presence. And I was like, okay, there's something here. There's something here. So much like going to New York or going to LA, my version of that was going to Ann Arbor. So U of M is really and then there's one other guy in the band that went to the other U of M, which is University of Minnesota, and that's Corey Wong. So Corey Wong is the one non-Michigan guy, but it's just across the lake and it's the same name.
I mean, that's really cool to hear. It's also just it's different than maybe most music school and musician stories you hear, where it's maybe MI or Berkeley, which is always mentioned. So it's really cool. I mean, something else you talked about was so Michigan, it ties to Motown, right? And some things you mentioned before as well, just these other huge disco or funk bands that you love, like Chic or Tower of Power. I just wanted to ask though, was there one record or one song that really got you started that you really loved? I mean, you mentioned the compilation. Is there a single song?
Yeah. Well, there's a few funk tunes that come to mind that I learned that added so much to my chops. And the big one that I always think of, speaking of Tower of Power, what is hit? Tower of Power. That one has this driving 16th note thing, which unlike a lot of funk music, which might have a little slower, on the one. Kind of like what I was playing with. And a lot of that is about keeping time. And the difference is you're subdividing in your head, or you're subdividing by maybe keeping the backbeat. And then that's about just choosing individual notes. You're subdividing, but you're choosing notes sporadically. Whereas with I almost said it gets funkier. That's the one we ripped off that song basically. With Tower of Power, what is hip? Instead of feeling all the subdivisions, you're actually playing them. And it's like a it's all that stuff, and that bass feel really hits something in me because it's almost like you get to be a drummer as well. And so what is hip was a pivotal song for me. And then the one that I say we kind of ripped off, It Gets Funkier, has that same and by developing the 16th note stuff, then I could start to do a lot of the ghost note stuff. So, for example, this bass was modeled after a P bass Junior, a Fender P bass Junior, and that one, the first track that I played, that with Vulpeck is my first car, and so that one. That's the bass line, but then I add in all the subdivisions. And so if you have developed the good 16th note time, then you can add in the ghost notes. So that one in particular was huge for me. The other one I think of a lot, I Wish. And that one, because unlike the straight 16th notes, that's straight 8th notes, but it's got this walking thing that it really taught me like the value of the leading notes. So it's really about leading into everything else, and then it's also about having this octave thing. And that's about a technique where you're just keeping your finger in the octave position at all times. So there have been like various songs, and those are probably both on that Pure Funk record, Pure Funk compilation. But I remember learning a few bass lines, so those would be two of them, that once you have learned that, then you incorporate that into your muscle memory. So whether it's the 16th note and keeping really good time, or whether it's learning to keep your hand in this box. I'm always in that box. Every time I'm playing, anytime I'm playing, I'm always in that octave zone. All octave, it's just all that stuff. So those are two that come to mind.
It's great to hear. I mean, I've heard you, and I think some people in the crowd have also heard as well. Like what is it? Like that's the one you see you mention a lot. So yeah, is Rocco Prestia like someone you really kind of admired previously? Or?
Yeah, huge influence for me. If I were to pick like a couple of those bass players that had that influence on me, he's definitely one of them. I've talked about Flea a lot. Flea's a big influence for me, and it turns out that Flea was looking back to a lot of the funk, like Parliament Funkadelic and stuff, and a lot of that stuff, would be like Bootsy Collins, and so then I started following that thread, and Bootsy Collins, he's one of those bass players that like everything he does is funky. Everything he can play one note and it's funky. And so that's why. But that's why I liked Flea, because I liked Flea because he said play every note like it's your last. So Flea, when I see him play, I'm like, oh, this guy's giving it everything in every note. He's like giving his whole body to it. He's giving everything he's got to it. So those are the bass players I like. Rocco Prestia I like for his time. Ferdine White from Earth, Wind & Fire I really like for his melodic playing. Bernard Edwards from Chic, that's all the disco octave stuff. A lot of that comes from him. And then like I was just playing that Stevie Wonder thing. I think like a lot of the key bass from Stevie Wonder. That's huge for me, because then you get the, you know, he goes. And all that, like, he's doing like on the keyboard, and so that stuff really influenced me a lot too. Yeah, look, basically each of these bass players, you can follow the thread back to a handful of people in the 60s. So James Jamerson is the one that Flea. I've told this story before, but when I was a kid, I wrote a letter to Flea, and he somehow found the time to respond to me. The thing that he said that stuck with me was just the simplest thing. He said, listen to James Jamerson. He said, if you learn what's going on, if you learn James Jamerson's bass lines, you'll be good. And that's basically like, you can trace a lot of the music that I love back to James Jamerson. And you can also, there's like one or two other people, Larry Graham, Louis Johnson, just a couple of these bass players that those would be the people that the slap bass would come from. Off the Wall, Michael Jackson, all that stuff. So now I just like to go back to those records, because I can see how that influenced everything else that I grew up listening to. Chili Peppers, Jamiroquai, it all goes back to that stuff.
That's really cool to hear. You're talking about that lineage kind of music and like how it goes through. I was almost going to ask about that letter that you wrote to Flea when you replied back. It's like crazy.
I mean, he's been a huge influence on me, and the Chili Peppers in general were like the soundtrack to my childhood. A lot of it, and I know that if you grew up in the '90s, the Chili Peppers were kind of they were the funkiest band, and Flea was the most visible bass player. He was the guy that was on the cover of, Bass Player magazine. So I feel it's really like important to have those sort of, bass heroes. He happened to be mine, and you can learn a lot from just seeing like what they were influenced by and what they were listening to.
It's cool to hear. Thank you for mentioning as well. I wanted to ask also, like, kind of playing off of that. I mean, let's say if we leave out like what I said, what are 3 things, like if your memory was blank right now, you can't remember how to play music at all, you can't remember how to play bass, like what are 3 like songs or exercises, I guess, that you want to like carry over to work on?
Well, it's funny. I was jamming with my brother, and we were playing a song that was one of the first songs that we ever jammed on, and one of the first bass lines that I ever played. It has nothing to do with the fact that my name is in the title of the song, but it's called Hey Joe by Jimi Hendrix. And I remember, because when I was learning the bass, a lot of the bass is about learning how to be comfortable on the fretboard and how to get from one chord to another. And that's the, like, bass, you're walking the bass. You're taking it. You're not just playing the roots. You're the person that leads it from one chord to another. So with that one, you're basically just chords being. That's it. But then the bass does this thing where it's walking in between them just chromatically. And it was the first time I ever had learned that. And that was big for me because it was just like, okay, turns out you can get from one chord to another by just literally walking chromatically. And a lot of what I do even now is just that, you know. You know. You know, coming back to that. That's just same kind of thing. So, Hey Joe would be one I would think of that would be important for learning leading tones. Another one, maybe the Sly and the Family Stone. Thank you for letting me be myself, because it's that classic open E slap stuff. It's like a you learn from that how to use open E and how to use simple octaves. So this is just two notes, you know. That's two notes, and then when you get the octave involved, it's just the same two notes, one note, one octave up. And then you add one more octave, still using just two notes, and it's the low E. So every note you're playing, that entire bass line is just D and E, you know. And that one is early slap, you know, early slap. And a lot of what I ended up playing, you know, you could just play a lot of different slap stuff is just in E, because it just feels so good to have that open low E. And then it's another one that really, keeping it with Sly and the Family Stone, If You Want Me to Stay. Because that one gives you the eighth note, ghost note groove, and it gives you this, you know. You learn how to emphasize different eighth notes. From that is how to get, you've got, you know, the way I play is just two fingers, and you learn how to get one finger to be emphasizing the downbeat and one emphasizing the upbeat. And then just like with before, the octave thing, I'm adding in octaves. And a lot of that is just to add a little bit of character to it, and you can do it wherever you want. And interestingly, that song was by Sly and the Family Stone originally, but was covered by the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and that's where I first heard it actually. So I had the Chili Peppers. Can't remember what record that was off of. It's like maybe Freaky Style, but I think it was on their What Hits was their compilation record, and that was on there. And so they did that song, and I heard it, and then I thought it was a Chili Peppers song, and then I later found out it wasn't, which is actually I feel a common thread for me as growing up in the 90s and the 2000s. You hear a song, and you're like, oh man, that's amazing, and then it's like, well, you know this cover, you know, or like I'm listening to Daft Punk, I'm like, oh, this is so sick. It's like, well, you know, they just took this song and just like sped it up. But yeah, those would be three that I would think of.
Okay, let's also shut up.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just a reminder also, I mean, I've been trying to look out if anyone's raising their hands. Does anyone have any questions so far? Anyone want to? Oh.
Thank you. We went to Fuji Rock Festival this year, so I was really excited to see you it's 30 meters away. I couldn't imagine, but today I so close to you.
Thanks.
Really excited, and I've been wanting to ask you this question, your 16 notes, even without ghost notes, your 16 notes, I feel sort of like a staccato.
Mm-hmm.
So Dean Town, so instead of I feel more like a so
Right.
each 6 notes, more like a staccato. So how would you do that? Is it like a left hand thing or right hand thing or maybe equalizing things? How do you do that?
Great question. Thanks for seeing us at Fuji too. That was amazing. Well, yeah. So this is something that I use a lot with Vulpeck. So you're right that originally it starts out as just open 16th notes. Pretty much just almost as a joke, we started up that song that way. But then, from that point on, it pretty much and you're right that all of that stuff, I'm doing a muting with pretty much with my left hand. So the way I'm doing that is I'm keeping the rest of my fingers resting on the strings. So really, at all times, even if I'm really just playing this, so that would be without muting. But then the way I do it is I hold the rest of my fingers on the strings. So those are all muted, and it's mostly the left hand, but it's also the right hand because I'm keeping, as soon as I hit the note, I let my right hand finger rest on the string. So the note is a little bit choked by the left hand. And the way I do that is, like I said, by holding these other fingers. But then the way I get the note to really be short is by the moment I pluck the string, my finger immediately comes back and rests on the string. So that, you're right that the combo it's the Tower of Power time field, and you need to have really, really precise, really, your time has to be impeccable, but then you have to also mute the strings if you want to get that sound that you're hearing on Dean Town. So yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah. With the pinky. Yeah. Yeah.
You still mute up.
Yeah.
So I can understand that for the rest
Yes.
of the fingers.
For the rest, right? With the pinky.
You need mute with your pinky.
Yes.
When it comes to when you
Play with the pinky. Good question. With the other strings or with the other fingers, you're right. You can use your pinky as your last line of defense. If you're playing with your pinky, then what I do is as soon as I've fretted the note, I let off the fret, but I don't let off the fret entirely. I just let off enough to be muting the string. So as soon as you fret, let your finger off the fret, but keep your finger on the string. I feel that's essentially what you're doing with both hands. Let the note ring just for a second, and then mute the string with both hands. Great question. Yeah, thank you for that.
I mean, in the future, if anyone else has questions, you can also just raise your hand.
I can't believe that you're actually here, firstly. Secondly, Swee Lee, thank you so much for hosting your out here in Singapore. huge fan, as you can tell. Can you just tell us what's the secret behind those sunglasses, firstly, and how instrumental it is to wear a sunglass while playing? I can see that you're right inside the pocket at all points of time.
Yeah.
And like a more technical question, I would say, like how much of music theory is imperative to understand when you're playing inside the pocket? But again, most of my questions are based on the sunglass and the music itself.
I'll start with the important part. Yeah, thank you, man. And thank you very much for your kind words. The first time that Vulpeck got on stage where I was wearing the shades, I remember we were in San Francisco. We were playing at Outside Lands Festival, sunny California day, and I was wearing sunglasses. Jack, I think, was wearing like a sort of like a Santa hat almost. I don't know why, but Stratton captured, somebody had filmed part of the show and it ended up on YouTube, and he grabbed a clip from it, and I'm pretty sure it was My First Car. It was just a particularly funky version of My First Car. Jack was feeling really good on the drums. And it was also early enough in our career that we didn't have that many like live recordings. It was like, I think it was 2016. And anyway, so I had the shades on, and Stratton kind of sent me the video. I mean, it's just like, I mean that's the look, right? I mean, just like as if to say like, oh, I mean, yeah, this kind of settles it, right? You know. so I did. So he kind of subtly asked me, you know, or I would say that each of us have slowly dialed in a look, and at that point Theo was still pretty heavy on the tank tops. He was doing a bandana thing, I think, for a while, and he had like these really big oversized glasses that were his dad's. I kind of had the shades. Stratton had the short shorts and the high soccer socks, and you know, everyone just sort of slowly found something that felt like a signature thing. And the original shades that I was wearing were Ray-Bans, but then those became basically prohibitively expensive because I would break or lose them on tour. So then I found a cheap knockoff brand called Knockarounds, which were like $10. And Knockaround was stoked about it, and they sent me a care package of like 100 sunglasses. So I did have, for a long time, I had like a closet full of Knockarounds. And then I found out I needed glasses. I need actual prescriptions, you know, so then I had to get prescription sunglasses. So these are Warby Parker prescription sunglasses, which I'm particularly fond of. But it does help me a little bit on stage because the brightness of the lights, and it also helps, like, I think you get a little bit of distance. For me, I play with my eyes closed a lot anyway, but it does give me like a little bit of distance and just lets me like not be overly thinking about like, oh, how are people perceiving, you know, everything right now, you know? So, yeah, that's the story with shades. Then with the music theory, it's a good question that I get a lot because I'll go to music schools and I'll do, you know, classes. And for me, there's a certain amount of music theory that you need in order to play. You cannot be playing in bands and learning songs if you don't understand the basics of chords, major and minor, and keys, and like basic things like major third versus minor third, like you know, how to walk from one chord to another and knowing whether I mean, there's really basic stuff, but it's like, am I walking up in the major key or in the minor key? That's important. Once I got to a certain level where I could learn things by ear, I was not learning things by sheet music. So for me, what it comes down to a lot is ear training. I think ear training is super important. It's been really important to me. I'm not personally deep on music theory. I have friends that are, and I have friends that don't. I've played with artists that don't even know what key they're, what chords they're, and they're amazing musicians, you know. So there's a spectrum there, but I do feel like it's important to learn enough theory such that you are comfortable playing with other people and just being able to talk about what you're playing. Like, I remember hearing that like the Rolling Stones in rehearsal, they can't start in the middle of the song. They have to start at the beginning of the song. And I love the Rolling Stones, but I don't think they're particularly well, you know, trained in music. I think there's a certain amount you need to do it. Now that said, if you want to be a session musician, you need to learn how to read music. And my grandfather was a session musician, and he could sight read music like that, you know. A lot of guys that I play with, we do the numbers. So it's like called the Nashville numbers sometimes. But when I read a chart, I just read the chord numbers. 1, 4, 5, go to the bridge, it's 6, 4, 1, whatever. So that's how I think about sheet music, to the numbers. So no, for me the most important thing is technique, ear training, and being able to learn music like quickly enough that if you have to read it or you have to learn it by ear, whichever one gets you to something pretty quickly. Because a lot of the time with Vulpeck, when we're in the studio, I have like half an hour to learn whatever we're about to play, if that. And usually Jack starts calling like the first take, like as soon as possible, like, as it makes us as uncomfortable as possible. So in that case, I think it's just about having your mind be like limber enough, and I think you just get that by just learning a lot of songs. So I just learned a bunch of songs like that I loved playing, like the ones I was just talking about, and I learned them by ear. So.
Just kind of going off of that, so you talked a bit about how theories helped, how it helps a lot of musicians, and you also were talking about these songs you've learned, and how they kind of got you to where you are, or what you learned from them. Do you have any advice for, I guess, musicians in general? Like, how do you bridge the gap between, learning all these things and actually finding your voice on the instrument, or kind of developing your own language?
That's a good question. If you find artists and songs that speak to you, and you learn what they're doing, usually I find you will then play other music that isn't that music, but you will bring what you learned from those into whatever else you play. So a lot of what I play is like very influenced by the kind of Flea or the Virgin White thing. So a lot of like, Virgin White does this thing where he does this shining star. Something I learned from Virgin White is this, I call it the bumblebee. Yeah. That's what he goes like. And so I would learn these little tricks, kind of like tricks of the trade. I would learn these little muscle memory things like that. And then I would start to incorporate them in anything else that I was playing. So I would play, new songs of Vulpeck. I would bring in my own thing. And then in terms of like, I think you have to play with a lot of other musicians. I think that's the other way that I got it. A part of it was learning by ear, like funk songs, no question. But I think another thing is if you play with a lot of different musicians, then you end up subconsciously being influenced by them. So a lot of what I, got was early on. I was playing with good musicians. When you play with good drummers, you end up having good time as a bass player. You play with good guitarists, you end up hearing the licks that they're playing, and you end up learning them on bass. Same with horn players. I learned a lot from horn players, from saxophone. And so my advice, anytime anyone asks me like, what can I do to get better at bass? I'm like, play with as many people as possible. Just play with as many drummers, as many guitarists, as many keyboard players as possible. For me, that's been the best thing. That's been the best way to learn.
More specifically, do you think, because you're mentioning other musicians and like the growth from that, right? Like playing with different musicians, like did something different in the homemade jam? Did that specifically influence that? Was that?
Yeah, it did. Actually, the band that I played in high school was something different in the homemade jam. It's a jam band. It's inspired by Fish. The whole thing was you go out on stage and you don't know what you're gonna do. This was my nightmare. I hated it. But we'd go out on stage and the first song we would play would be a total improvised jam. We'd be playing like the biggest gig of our lives in front of like 1,000 people, and the set list would say jam at the top. And but you end up learning how to improvise, and that was what I took away from that band. We would play 3-hour gigs, and a lot of it was improvising. And so you would learn as a bass player how to accompany people, because you'd end up invariably having a 10-minute guitar solo, wherein you have to, as a bass player, somehow try to keep yourself and everyone else interested. Obviously it's their job to be playing something melodic and interesting, but you as the bass player have to be the one who's like holding down the groove. If the groove isn't there, it's not you are there to accompany and back up the soloist. It's like being a drummer in that way. And you can't, the bass is also one of the few instruments on stage that can't just stop and take a break. If you're playing guitar, you're playing horn, you just like step back, I'm just gonna listen, I'm just gonna like let somebody, bass, you don't get a chance to stop. And so what I really learned from that band is improvisation, great stamina, playing like 3-hour gigs, being able to get through it, getting calluses on my fingers, and also like being, I was the youngest guy in the band, and it's the same thing when I joined Vulpeck. I think playing with people who are better and more experienced than you is really important. And so with that band, I was the young guy coming in, and they were already a band, and they were already playing these certain jams, and I had to learn them, and I had to step up and play gigs when I was really young with that band. So I do think like that band influenced a lot of what I do, even though I'm not like a huge like Fish head. And in fact, that was one of the things. Theo actually grew up listening to Fish, and it's like there's a divide in the band. It's like Fish is like really divisive. So is Steely Dan actually. I love Steely Dan. One of the guys in the band is going to remain nameless. He does not like Steely Dan, and this is like that was a problem for a while. But it's the same with Fish. Very divisive band, but the jam thing, if you can play for 20 minutes on one song and make it interesting, that's worth something. So.
It's really cool to hear, because I thought it would just be interesting to hear from you as well, like how big a part like music it plays, like playing with the band, playing with other people.
Yeah.
And just hearing you talk about that, it's really cool. We don't have too much time left. I'm going to ask one more question, and if anyone else has questions, please feel free to raise your hand. Okay, one more question, and we'll get to everyone else's questions. So,
thank you for coming. Welcome to Singapore. Hello. Thank you for coming. Welcome to Singapore. I'd like to know about your approach to bass soloing, because nowadays bass solo is a very rare thing. So when you're in your Fearless Filers or with Vulpeck, when you take a solo, how do you approach? Especially, how do you make a bass solo interesting? And what do you demand of the other musicians, like guitar don't play or keyboard?
Great question. So what I like about the bass is you could almost get away with just your solo could just be everyone else dropping out and you just keep playing the bass line. Like in its most rudimentary form, that is a bass solo, and people are usually pretty happy with it. A lot of like the chic stuff is just a breakdown, and so it's like they just muted every other track on the record, and they just kept the bass, and everyone else was playing, but they were muted. So in the simplest form, that's a bass solo. And what does that demand of you as a bass player? It means you have to play that thing like with a lot of feel. You have to be giving it all your feel, because you're the only thing there. And so when I solo, I usually start from building it from the bass line. So the bass line is already in there. And then you build up something that you want to. The way I like to build a bass solo is just starting from the basics. So like if you were a drummer, you'd be starting with the kick drum, and then you'd be adding in the hi-hat, and then you'd be adding in the snare. And so that's how I like to do it. When Vulpeck plays, Beastly, I never asked anybody else to stop playing. I definitely never asked them to leave the stage. But they do that. And it's kind of like a fun moment where it's just the bass on the stage, which is a rare thing. So like, with that thing, I'll often just like, I'll just start with like really simple, and then I'll just add in a little bit more. I actually got that from Bootsy Collins. Bootsy Collins there's a great clip on YouTube if you haven't seen it. He talks about the power of the one, and if you just play the one and then you keep coming back to it, and then it's everything you do in the whatever you do in the middle, as long as you come back and you have really good time and you hit that one. So a lot of what I do is just build the groove and then play on top of it, accompany yourself on top of it. And I really like to build from themes on the bass. And so I like to find something that sticks and then repeat it and kind of add on top of it. I also feel like if you can play off the drummer, once the drummer comes in or maybe they're already in, a lot of the time I like to play off the drummer because you can hear rhythmic ideas. I have the great privilege of playing with a lot of really, really great drummers. Nate Smith, I think he's up there with maybe the greatest drummers in the world right now. I think he's got something to say at all times. So when I'm listening to him, he's accenting the hi-hat or he's doing something on the kick drum. And as a bass player, you can catch that. You do like a little call and response with the drummer. I really love doing that. But for me, at the end of the day, you are there to set the groove as the bass player. I mean, that's your job. So you might be soloing, but your job is still to keep the groove. So I think less about doing something that's going to be like impressive or sort of like, particularly out of the box. I think of just keeping the groove going, and then pretty much everything you do there, as long as it feels good. Like I said, you could just play the exact thing you were playing 8 bars ago, but everyone else has stopped playing, and it'll be interesting if you're still grooving really hard. That's what I really like to hear as a bass player. Is just like, wow, that solo was really grooving. That's what I like. So, thanks for the question. Yeah.
I think we still have time for like 1 or 2 more questions.
Hi Joe, thank you for coming. I have 2 questions. One is useful and one is fun. The useful one is music is an endless learning. So is there something in the last few years that blew your mind or you find extremely insightful that is like, there is a break in the rehearsal and you're like, guys, have you seen this thing? Like something new. The fun question is, if you build your dream band of any living or passed out musicians, who you will take for the gig? Thank you.
Great questions. I do tend to really love, I love to hear really great drummers. So that's the thing that when Stratton shows me a clip of a really, really great drummer, that's when it usually blows my mind. And that's just because I'm a bass player and I get off on rhythm. So, it's been a few years now. It'll sound like I'm bragging, name dropping. I got to play with the guys that were those moments for me where my mind was blown. Stratton showed me the video of Nate Smith, and he showed me the video, and I was just like, I've never seen anyone do what he's doing. You remember he'd like drop a drumstick, but he'd keep playing with one hand. It was the killingest stuff you've ever heard with one hand. Then, right around that time, Stratton showed me Lewis Cole on drums. And Lewis Cole is doing like unbelievable machine gun level, like 16th note stuff. His time is so good and his stamina is so incredible. And the stuff he would do where he puts a little, cymbal on his snare and his sound is so good. I mean, this is why I feel lucky as a bass player. I would get to go on and play with both of those guys. You know, then I saw like Domi and JD Beck and hearing some of that stuff, and Thundercat. Like these are people that are pushing. I feel like they're pushing the genre of funk music, and they're dialing it up to a point where I'm like, well, this is like the computer the computer age of like these people are doing something that previously was only possible like on a computer, and now they can do it like by hand. So those players in particular did really blow my mind. But then, as a bass player, I'm still coming back to things that people did in the '60s and '70s that are the roots of what I'm doing now. So like coming back to drummers, one of my favorite drummers, Jeff Porcaro from Toto. I still go back and I watch his YouTube like instructional videos, and that was one of the things Jeff Stratton and I would nerd out about Steely Dan videos. And so we would go back and we'd watch, and it would be Jeff Porcaro, and it would be, and here I get to name drop again, it would be Bernard Purdie on the drums, and we got to play with Bernard Purdie, played with him two months ago. You get to step in a time machine and go back to the 60s, 70s. You're playing with Aretha Franklin's drummer. It's the most incredible thing. But so drummers are what kind of get me excited about groove and funk music. And the through line there would be, to your second question, the ultimate dream band that I would form. Jeff Porcaro would be the drummer, no question. Jeff Porcaro played with Michael McDonald, played with Toto, played with Steely Dan, Boz Scaggs, a million great artists. He would be the drummer. Probably, on guitar, I love like all the funk guitarists that you think of, the Nile Rodgers. Nile Rodgers is probably, I guess I'd go with, there's a million amazing guitarists, but I'm just thinking of like the rhythmic thing, and I play like funk and disco music. And who, I get to choose a bass player, or I get to play in the band. I get to play in the band. Okay, good. That's good. So I get to play in the band. I would choose those three. I would choose, on keys, I would choose probably Billy Preston. He was kind of like the fifth Beatle, but then I got so into his like synth funk stuff, him, or like he would probably be the guy, or like one of those synth, Bernie Worrell, or George, anyway, I would choose like a synth player, probably, but like an 80s like synth player like that or something. But, yeah, great question. Thanks, man.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
Hi Joe, thanks so much for coming. You talked about bass heroes. I think, at least for me, you're the reason I picked up the bass. So it's really legendary. You were here. I didn't ask you a question, so I just had to ask you this. It's about sound and tone. We've come to expect a certain sound from you and basically all the Vulpeck records and Fierce Live and everything. And I've been trying to emulate it for many years, and obviously YouTube and forums, they talk about it. But I have to hear from you yourself, what do you think, or how would you describe your own sound, like punchy, or like your tone? And for those of us who have limited equipment, I know you mentioned Jack basically does all the mixing, but in terms of like sound, on the sound side, what can I do? I don't have a compressor. I know the muting is a big thing, but playing nearer the bridge and things like that.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Thanks for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Yeah, for me, old strings are a big part of my sound. So these are newer strings on this bass, and it's a little bit bright. But I really love, whether they're round wound or flat wounds. I play flat wounds nowadays. I started out playing round wounds. But what's important to me in both cases is that the strings are old. So I do not personally my ear, I don't like the sound of new strings too bright. I like it when it's mellow and when it's warm. So I really like to use old strings. I do, like you said, I do like to shift my position to play closer to the bridge, and when I'm soloing especially, because I just like the sound of that rubber bandy kind of like taut sort of thing. I don't really play with any pedals, so for me, I like to play through an amp that's really warm and neutral. Like I like Mark bass, I like Aguilar. The compressor is big in the studio. Everything I play on Vulpeck, Jack is really hitting hard with the Vulp compressor. So that's a big thing. And there's also a thing about like, I don't like, I like to be sitting in the middle between having a little bit of like growl, like a little bit of that grittiness, but not too much. Like I don't like it when it's like fully fuzzing out or like breaking up in the amp, you know? For me, it's, a lot of it is the old cliche, you know, it's in the fingers. It's like everything I talked about today where you're learning, you know, to mute the strings, and you're also learning to play with really good, precise time and attack is just in your fingers. It's just technique stuff. When I first started playing, I would I like to record myself or listen back to recordings of myself. So if you record yourself, even with your phone or with like a little whatever looper or whatever it is, and then you listen back, I think that's really important, because then you'll hear all the little imperfections that you're playing, and then you'll be able to clean that up. And I think playing cleanly is a big part of like what people dig, like when they talk about my bass playing, because it speaks. Like then in that way you're saying something more clearly, rather than, I think a lot of bass it gets lost in the mix, you know. So that's kind of how I think about that. Yeah. Thanks.
I think I just have one more question for you, and I'll probably wrap it up. I just wanted to ask, since you've been talking about bass the whole night, you've also talked about horn players, though, like Maceo Parker, Fred Wesley. I just wanted to ask, how have those non-bass players affected you, or affected your bass playing, like you musically?
That's a great question. I think for me, listening to funky horn players like the ones you mentioned from James Brown's band has a huge effect on me, because the way they play is very much building on themes, and it's very rhythmic. But I also got a lot from guitarists. I get a lot from like almost like a blues guitar riffs, you know. John Mayer is playing a lot of blues guitar riffs, and I would cop, you know, a lot of the you'd learn a lot of that like blues scale riffing stuff. I would learn from guitarists. Then I would learn a lot, like I said, Stevie Wonder synth bass. A lot of the bass lines that I love sadly turn out to be synths. Like I really love that you know, Jamiroquai Canned Heat, you know, the one that's in the Napoleon Dynamite movie. Amazing track, and I love the bass line, and I learned the bass line. I was like, oh, this is so sick. And it's synth bass, you know, but it's still amazing, and you learn a lot from keyboard bass players too. I think as long as you can take something from any instrument, like when I'm playing with Vulpeck, I'm constantly learning from the other guys. They're playing, you know, Theo is one of these guys. He's a multi-instrumentalist. He sounds like Theo on every instrument, you know, which goes to show that you can transfer a lot of what you're playing on one instrument to another. He might be singing it, he might be playing it, he might be playing drums, so it sounds like he's singing on the drums, you know. It's a lyrical quality. So I think that's what I picked up from horn players, but it's something you can pick up from singers, guitarists, keyboard players, even drummers. So I think that comes back to just like listening and playing with people who are better than you. That's where I picked that stuff up.
It's so sick to hear.
Thanks.
Is there anything else you'd like to say tonight, Will?
I just want to thank everyone for being here, and Swee Lee and Sam and Isaac and the whole team. It's really an amazing story you built here. Like, this is such a cool space that you have live music, you have amazing instruments, you have the cafe, you have records. Like, I think it's a cool, just like musical incubator that is like, I'm so happy that I learned about you guys and that you were so receptive to putting on a little event like this. I'm really grateful, and I love Singapore. I love being here. Like, the people are so cool, and it's such a it's such a welcoming place. So yeah, I really appreciate you all coming out. It's really amazing for me, and I look forward to hanging and chatting afterwards. So, thank you guys.
Would you want to play one last song for us?
Yeah, I'll play one more. Any requests?
Animal spirits.
What's which one did you say? Oh, Disco Ulysses. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, everyone, give it up for Vulpeck!
Appreciate it.
All right, we're going to do a group picture, Darren. We're going to do a group picture, so please follow the instructions of our photographer, Mr. Darren.
Okay, kind of squeeze closer towards the